Where do we see the gospel in this story? After Jesus was transfigured, two very important people just appeared and began talking to him. Moses and Elijah. Why those two guys? To the Jews, Moses and Elijah are kind of like, Abraham Lincoln and George Washington to Americans, right? Big deal. There are the heroes of the faith. When the Jews referred to the Bible, what we call the Old Testament, their Bible, they called it the Law and the Prophets, right? When Jesus talks about the Law and the Prophets in his words, he's referring to the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. These two Old Testament figures represent the Law and the Prophets to the people of Israel. Moses, pretty obvious, right? Through him, God gave the law to the people, handed him the tablets of stone with the Ten Commandments written on it up on the mountain. And then Moses recorded more and more of God's law in the books of the Old Testament, the books of the Torah. What about Elijah, though? He didn't write any books, right? He wasn't a writing prophet like Daniel or Isaiah. But what he was the picture of what a prophet should be. All the other prophets tried to pattern themselves after Elijah. He was the embodiment of the office of prophet. He preached to the people and he called them to repentance. Every prophet that came after him looked to him as the ideal. So these two men represented all that God had revealed to Israel at that time. They appeared and they talked to Jesus on the mountain. And what did they talk about? Well, Jesus in Luke tells us they talked about his coming departure from Jerusalem. In other words, his suffering and his death. God's way of saying to Jesus, by your suffering and death, you're going to fulfill everything. You're going to fulfill the law and the prophets. Salvation will not come to my people through their law keeping or even through their repentance, but it will come through the suffering and death of the Son of God. That is the gospel.